Champlain Room audiocast test.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Welcome to this April meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, a meeting which I suspect will be relatively short, just in terms of managing expectations. Before we get into the formal agenda, I think it would be important to acknowledge the arrival of two new members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee family. Councillor Moffat has a new addition, and Councillor McKenney has a grandchild born this morning. So we're always happy to have new heritage-sensitive members of the committee. That's right.
Mine's 700% older than yours.
Okay, so turning to the agenda before us, first question is whether we have any declarations of interest. I see none. The confirmation of minutes from our 26th March meeting. Any comments, questions, changes? Carried? Great. Okay, we have two substantive items before us this morning. The first is the application to alter 231 O'Connor Street, which is a property within the Centretown Heritage Conservation District and thus under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. If you've seen the report, you know that this is an application to reinstate the red brick front facade of the house. I think there's a new front porch involved and a couple of new windows, I think both on the east, south, and west facades. So it is a fairly routine approval. You'll have noticed in the report that there was a complication in terms of work that was undertaken earlier, and it's important to note that whatever we do this morning is without prejudice to any legal options which the corporation wishes to pursue. And on that note, maybe I'll just ask legal staff if there's anything further that you want to say on that.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to inform the subcommittee that there are technically no legal implications to adopting the recommendation that's in the report. However, Legal Services is aware, and the City of Ottawa is aware, that the initial work was done without a valid heritage permit under the Act, and the City is preserving its right to take legal action against the owner of the property on this matter under the Act in the future, no matter what is determined here this morning.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think I noted I think what is a typo in the report on page 3. I believe that it was in late January 2015 at the bottom of page 3, not January 2014, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, which is fine, which makes sense because we're obviously in the 90-day period now. So that's all I wanted to say as a way of introducing this item. Staff are available if any members of the committee have a question with regard to the application.
Are we going to get a presentation on it or just question? Move right to question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, Member Smallwood.
Thank you. Mine isn't so much. Well, it is a question, but it has a preamble to it. If I can beg your indulgence, I don't necessarily have a problem with this application, but my concern was just some of the wording in the report. The existing building, it states that the current building the current windows are a mix of historic and modern, and that the proposal is to replace these. Some have already been lost, but I'm assuming replace on the other facade some of the historic windows with a mix of with simulated divided lights, and then the comment is this would unify the appearance. The Centretown Historic District Guidelines, number 2, states that the original features should be conserved, replaced only using the same material dimensions and profile. Where there's to be replacement, it should only be replacement of badly deteriorated components. There's nothing about unifying the appearance as being a reason for replacing historic elements. And the standard and guidelines also mention that replacement should be physically and visually compatible with. So the reason I'm raising this is that my concern is that perhaps not so much in this building, but in other buildings, I wouldn't want to see that we set a precedent where we're saying that we're going to replace historic windows with new ones just to make them to unify the appearance. This flies in opposition to what both the standards and guidelines and the Centretown Historic Conservation District guidelines call for. And I'm also concerned because I think windows provide one of the, I mean, sometimes heritage is about nuances and about finer details. And to me, the windows, historic windows especially, with their true divided lights, are one of the most important aspects of an historic building. So I'm concerned to see this comment, or these comments that both encourage, or seem to encourage the replacement with simulated divided lights in all facades. And I also have a problem with simulated divided lights because I think they just cheapen the image of what a heritage building is. I think people looking at it, not everybody has the same degree of experience with windows, but for somebody who does understand windows, there is a difference. There is a major difference between simulated divided lights and true divided lights. So I raise this as a point of concern in a general sense.
Okay, thank you for that. Just looking at staff to see if you have any comment on that or not. I'm not forcing you to comment, but.
Might as well use the one that's closer to me. I guess perhaps it is just a problem with the wording. The sentence, which will unify the appearance of the building, was not meant to be a justification. It was meant to be a observation. The windows in this building, in my opinion, are not sort of character-defining elements in any real way, and my understanding is they're in quite poor condition. I haven't been able to access the site because it is under construction at the moment. So I see your point, and we do work very hard on a daily basis with property owners to convince them to retain historic windows. And in this instance, it wasn't something that we felt was a serious priority for this building. And in terms of it setting a precedent, you know, every building is assessed on its own merits, and we constantly say that.
Could I just ask then that we note in here that the windows are being replaced because they were not a character-defining element and they were in poor or deemed to be in poor condition as far as they understood? That way, at least it's clear why we're doing it. Thanks.
Yeah, I have no objection to that being reflected in the minutes of this discussion, if members agreed. I don't think there's a need to change the actual recommendation, but we can certainly do that. Okay, any other questions or comments on this application, questions to staff or comments more generally? Okay, I'm going to assume that means we're okay with the report recommendation. So on the recommendation to approve the application to alter 231 O'Connor, carried? Okay, great. Okay, so turning to the next item on our agenda, which is the report which I've prepared following the facilitated session that we had in March, which was itself the subject of, in some ways, mandated by the governance report, which Council passed in early December. So my reflections on the facilitated session is that it was very, very useful. I want to thank staff again for their help in both preparing and helping to guide us through the discussion. What I tried to do in the report was reflect the 5 areas that we discussed over the course of the morning. And I think it's fair to say that the discussion gave us both an opportunity to learn more and understand in a clearer fashion the various tools at the subcommittee's disposal. And I think we did a reasonably good job of arriving at a few issues which we thought could be subject to further exploration. So what the report intends to do, and I'll just run through it quickly, is essentially provide guidance to staff in terms of some of the issues which we wanted to discuss at a future point with regard to the discussion that took place that morning. So going through it very, very quickly, on planning applications, there was a discussion of the fact that there was no window for us to look at applications for official plan or zoning bylaw reviews or minor variances. I think on the first point, it was agreed that maybe we want to consider some kind of information mechanism so that we do have some sort of heads up when there is an application for a designated property to be rezoned or for the zoning to be reflected differently in the official plan. So we're asking in recommendation 1 on page 4 for staff to report back to us with a few options. And then I think it was agreed that with regard to minor variances, there is very little the subcommittee can do. We run into legal issues with regard to the fact that both the subcommittee and the Committee of Adjustment are creatures of council with very different mandates. So the idea in recommendation 2 was simply to reaffirm the fact that the current practice is an appropriate one, and we're not anticipating any changes to the practice of the heritage staff being active participants in the comment process of applications for minor variances for properties that are either designated under Part 4 or 5. So that's Part 1. Under the Heritage Register and Heritage Reference List, again, I thought we had a good conversation. There were 2 elements that I tried to capture in the actual recommendation. The first, that staff continue their intention of looking at that is number 2, that staff continue to look at recommendation 1, examine the properties listed on the Heritage Reference List for possible inclusion on the Heritage Register or for designation, and we talked about that as being a larger project, which all members expressed support for. And on item 2, so this question of does the subcommittee want to consider perhaps through possible changes to the official plan or other ways for a consideration of properties that are on the Heritage Register. And I think the city of Markham was used during our discussion as an example of a city which has gone down that route. So we thought it would be useful to hear from staff on what some of those options were. Maybe before I continue, and I should have stopped maybe after the first section, are there any comments on this so far? Any questions or comments on Councillor Wilkinson?
On the first group of ones.
Just your mic, I think.
For the Committee of Adjustment items, I agree with the staff view of recommendations, but I was thinking it would be helpful if there's a major one that they at least let us know about it, because we may want to provide some input to staff in doing their comments. Not that we would comment ourselves, but and also just to be aware, because there are, as we pointed out last time, there's a lot of things go there, but there's only it's a smaller number that they comment on, and that would be probably even smaller if it's something relatively significant. And I'd leave it up to their judgment to say whether it's significant or not. And it would just be an information report, but if we had any comments or anything on that, the ward councillor would be aware of it, because we are notified of these Committee of Adjustments. And sometimes I go there when I disagree with the city staff and the Committee of Adjustment, and the community disagrees with it. I will support community often on Committee of Adjustment. And I don't know if you've had one of those yet, but we don't get them very often. I've got one right now. But I think it would be helpful for us to know, the magnitude of what, if anything, fairly significant. And the Committee of Adjustment can make very significant changes. They consider it minor to add 2 stories to an apartment building. That's not extremely minor in my view. So it's they can change the whole character of a building.
Yeah,
I just wanted to raise that as a point, whether it would be helpful to know, and I don't know how much work that would give. I'm a little concerned about the amount of work in this for staff already.
Yeah, I know we had a good discussion about this during the actual session. What was raised is the fact that I believe there are about 150 applications per year was the number that
that they're commenting on, I think. It was not, but I wasn't looking at all 150. But of that, there's probably only half a dozen that are going to make a significant impact on things. And I think that their staff here are well enough aware of because they're working with it all the time, to know if something is significant or not significant.
Just to interject through you, Mr. Chair, that the ones that are highly significant or that have a major impact on a heritage buildings would be coming to the Built Heritage Subcommittee anyway, because through the application to many of them would through the application to alter under the Ontario Heritage Act. So just to remind the committee that when there is an application under the Heritage Act that involves a building that would also have to go to Committee of Adjustment, it comes to the Built Heritage Subcommittee first. So Built Heritage Subcommittee, Planning Committee, and Council make their decision, and that decision, the Committee of Adjustment is aware of that decision. So the Committee of Adjustment is looking at their variances, and the belief is that if they see that that the heritage application was supported, then they will support those variances. So what that leaves, through you, Mr. Chair, is the application, Committee of Adjustment applications for variances for buildings that aren't designated, and I think that certainly we can work out a way of informing. I think there would be very few a year, and we can try to work out a way with
the chair, yeah.
With the chair and with the committee assistant on how to get those agendas to you for information.
What I'm concerned about more is that we go through the whole process, they do the application, everything's going ahead, then they decide they're going to make another change and go with the Committee of Adjustment. That's what I'm dealing with right now. What Council approved they don't like, so they're trying to get it changed again by Committee of Adjustment. And those are the ones I think that could cause some problems. There wouldn't be very many.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Yeah, that is true, Councillor.
I know
we'll certainly.
I think, Sally, you've got the judgment. If you think something, they're trying to pull a fast one on it, if I can put it that way, I think you'd let us know.
Thank you. We'll work that out. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, I'm going to leave that as not necessarily requiring
and I did have a little comment, I think, on the second one, too. I have to remember what it was.
Sorry, Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, unless there's somebody else on the planning. It was on the, to bring it up again.
Sorry, did you want to comment on something in this?
It was the second one that I'm trying to find where it is now. That was the official, the first one was on the planning things, wasn't it? And the second one was on, the designations. The only thing on this one that I was wondering, the staff, there's no timing in any of these, and there's some rather large amounts of work in some of these. Are you going to leave it up to staff to take a look at these and come back and let us know when they can actually do it? Because I don't want to put it on that they have to have it done in the next 2 or 3 months when something might be very considerable amount of work. And I'd rather they did the day-to-day work first.
Yeah, I think the reason there were no timelines attached was exactly to be sensitive to that point. So maybe we could ask staff at one of the next couple of meetings to give us an informal indication of when they would want to stage
a work plan of how it can fit into their work plan is what I was thinking of. Okay, that's what I saw. That's the only thing I was concerned about there.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we can respond to both those points without necessarily amending the text of the recommendations. Any other comments on either the planning portion, the first part, or the Heritage Register, Heritage Reference List? Mr. Vice Chair?
On the question of the Heritage Register and the Heritage Reference List, the recommendation is that staff continue to examine the properties on the Heritage Reference List. And I think relating to the question that Councillor Wilkinson raised about work plan and schedule, I know that we were briefed that there is the work plan for the planning department is coming up shortly, but can we just get a preview of the level of effort that is planned for this year on the Heritage Reference List review, just so that the members of the committee have a heads up as to whether or not it will be anticipated in this quarter, the next quarter. So that's one of the questions, because it has a bearing on understanding how in the transition period before the work is done, there are applications that are coming through buildings that are on the Heritage Register that are of some significance. And I'm just going to give one example, and that is 180 Metcalfe Street. 180 Metcalfe Street is a building designed by Werner Nofke, and that is in for a rezoning application right now, which is quite a major change to the site. There is a cultural heritage impact statement that was required. Will 180 Metcalfe Street come to this committee because it's on the Heritage Reference List? Or so I'm talking about the transition period now. And so when do we expect that the work plan will be announced and where we will be on this aspect of the work.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So you have two questions, work plan question and 180 Metcalf question. I'll start with 180 Metcalf. We anticipate that a report on 180 Metcalf will be in front of the committee in June with regard to its, because it's currently not designated, and there'll be a designation report being brought forward in the June meeting. And then your other question, which I've forgotten. Oh, wait, no, the work plan. The work plan is evolving, and certainly the highest priority for the Heritage Services section next year and in this term of council is the Heritage Register, and so we will start it. In Q2, and I don't know. We haven't yet analyzed how long we think it will take to do. And the work planning process is underway, and the term of council will be approved. I think that perhaps one of the councillors can help me. I think it's June that it's being considered, and so it will be in place at that time.
So the work plan, the draft work plan as it relates to heritage matters, that will be, it won't come to this committee first for information.
I don't, through you, councillors, there is no draft. I mean, there will be a work plan, and it will go through the normal work planning process, and it's the PGM work plan, and heritage is one part of PGM, and that is part of the planning process. And I can defer to Don Herwire, because the whole work planning process, we're a piece of it, but he might be able to add some clarity in terms of timing.
Mr. Herwire, did you have any clarity?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it'd be best if we get back to you on specifics on the timing, unless Chair Herder happens to know. I'm not familiar with the exact timing.
Okay. That's
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I took a shot.
Okay, so we'll hear back more about the work plan process at our May meeting. Any other comments on those first two sections? Again, either the Heritage Register reference list or the planning application point. Okay, so I'll proceed to part 3, which was the discussion we had on the heritage overlay. I thought this was particularly useful, both because I think for some of us it was great to get a clear understanding of what the heritage overlay does and does not do, and I thought it was also useful to hear about ways in which we can imagine some of our various tools interacting a little bit as we contemplate potential changes, both in the actual register, as we update plans for the HCDs, and as we anticipate again increasing or creating more dynamic tools for the subcommittee to consider. The one complication I think that we discovered was that in light of the fact that the heritage overlay as it's currently configured does not actually give the committee an easy way to involve itself, namely because there are two possibilities. One is a proponent seeks a building permit and is abiding by Section 60 in the existing zoning bylaw, in which case there isn't a hook for the subcommittee to look at it. And the second possibility is that the proponent is seeking a minor variance on a property that's the subject of a heritage overlay, and there too there isn't an obvious avenue for us there. So what that means is that we have sort of an immediate issue that we have to solve, which is that the governance report in some ways asked us through the amended terms of reference to consider heritage overlay matters. So I think what I heard from the facilitated session is we should probably put off doing that because we don't have a way to do that at present, but that subject to staff's advice and to the subcommittee's further consideration of perhaps a changed, modernized overlay process, that we could return to that during the midterm governance discussion. So I think when we're finished going through the report, Councillor Moffat is going to have some advice for us in terms of how we amend the terms of reference in light of what we have before us in the governance report. So we can hold off for a few minutes on that, but I just wanted to give members the opportunity to comment on their reaction either to the discussion we had or to the proposed recommendation that we asked staff to look at the Yeah, the opportunity for examining and perhaps modernizing the overlay mechanism as part of that larger discussion of our amended or expanded tools.
I think the timing again.
Just your microphone. Councillor Wilkinson.
The timing again is an issue. Whether we want to wait as long as the midterm is another question. But if staff do something that they've looked at it and they can give us an idea of when and if they can actually handle it at that point, and then they can put it into our own work plan, whether it's 2 years, next year or the year after. I don't think we want to wait till the last year of council because that was something that may require some decisions that will take time to implement.
Yeah, I mean, I think my only caution is this is a fairly substantive piece of work. Essentially, we're saying in conjunction with the examination of whether we would want to look at a Markham-style consideration of heritage of properties under the register in light of anything that we would need to do with the official plan, the overlay would be one of the things that staff would look at.
But they start usually working on the next official plan usually about 2 years ahead of the time we approve it, which would be in about 2 years' time. And I think we'd want to have this done in conjunction with the next OP rather than having it as a separate timing.
Okay.
So that's a case of whether staff can take a look at what they need to have to do that, and if they can do it, in fact.
Okay. Well, again, I mean, further to what I said earlier, maybe we can ask staff at the next meeting to come back to us with an informal sense of how they want to stage the various recommendations in the report, and I think they can take into account your useful point of wanting to make sure that we're lining up with any other larger official plan amendment or other processes. Yeah. Okay. All right, so if no other comments on that, I'll just turn to part 4, which was the cultural heritage impact statements. And here, the issue we discussed was the desirability for the committee to have a sense when a cultural heritage impact statement is triggered in a case where we otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to look at or comment on a particular application. So I don't think we have the answer today, but what we're doing is asking staff to think about a procedure that would allow us either as an information point or otherwise to look at or to be aware of applications that trigger a cultural heritage impact statement. So that's simply what that section says. Mr. Vice Chair.
I just want to draw people's attention to the letter that has come in from Heritage Ottawa today, which addresses some points in this mandate review, and one relates to the cultural heritage impact statements, and the Heritage Ottawa suggestion is to the Built Heritage Subcommittee that it comment if the committee deems appropriate on an application for which there is a CHIS. And I don't know if everybody had a chance to read the Heritage Ottawa letter yet, because it came in late last night, and I just picked it up this morning. But there were also comments on the item relating to the Heritage Register, which we already talked about. But I think the 4 bullet points in their letter are really wise counsel, and we should do things like ensure that the city moves proactively towards getting the heritage reference list on the website so that communication to the public is much more transparent. But I think that...
You know what time that came in?
Yeah,
It's in the shared drive.
It could be on our agenda.
It's in the shared drive.
Yeah.
I've been trying to read it on my little hand.
Okay. Well, we will make sure that members have copies. We can circulate them. And I was going to make reference to this afterwards, but now is a good time. So I think it's the important point just to note is we're not making a decision about the particular process today, but I think this is useful input both to us and to staff as we contemplate some of these changes. Sorry, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, and that's really all my point was, is to draw attention to the Heritage Ottawa letter that studiously commented on the items on this agenda.
Yeah. And since I see members of Ottawa Heritage in the audience, thank you very much for your contribution. That was very useful. Okay, so with that, we can turn to the last substantive point we talked about at the session, which was the idea of asking staff to consider how best to inform us when requests for Part 4 designations do not meet the criteria. So you'll recall that we had a good discussion about various ways we could do that as an information item. Could that then be pulled down to an action item if a member wished to, and so on. So we're not going to make a decision on the details of that, but I think there was an interest in hearing from staff on maybe a few options for how to consider that moving forward. So that's why that one is short and sweet. Any comments on that? Okay, great. So really, that was it. I hope members found that session useful. I think we talked about maybe wanting to consider something like that again over the course of the coming months and years if there is a particular item which we think needs deeper analysis or attention. And when staff come back to us in reaction to the recommendations, we can make the decision as to whether there's a particular item that needs more thorough consideration. So, general comments or questions, Councillor Moffat?
I just have a motion here with regards to the heritage overlay aspect. I think it actually might address some of the concerns that Councillor Wilkinson brought forward in terms of timing. Just to refer the implementation of the heritage overlay mandate for Built Heritage Subcommittee to the midterm governance review. Obviously, that would take place in 2016 and would likely get finalized at the latest. I think February 2017 is usually when we might see that be finalized. So that would be give plenty of time. I don't expect the official plan review to commence in earnest until about 2018. So that would give plenty of time for that. And then as part of that, so that's a motion to the referral, of course. And as part of that, just provide direction to staff to amend the terms of reference to remove references to the heritage overlay mandate pending the outcome of the midterm governance review.
Okay, great. So why don't we deal with the two issues separately. So first on Councillor Moffat's motion. Carried? Carried. Okay, great. And then on the report itself, so the motion here is that the subcommittee approve the recommendations contained within the report. And again, we'll get some idea from staff at the next meeting as to their thoughts on potential timelines for when this information we're seeking would come back. So on the recommendation, carried?
As amended.
Great, as amended. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes that portion, that substantive item for us this morning. So continuing on through the agenda, any notices of motion? Any inquiries? Okay, Mr. Vice Chair.
My inquiry has to do with the University of Ottawa campus master plan that is being prepared. This campus master plan has been in process for the last year and a half, and I'm on the University of Ottawa Campus Planning Advisory Committee, so I'm quite familiar with it. And one of the things that I wanted to inquire is whether or not their city staff, planning staff or heritage staff, were intending to invite the University of Ottawa to provide a briefing on the master plan for the campus to the Built Heritage Subcommittee specifically. So that's my question.
Okay. Chair Harder, welcome.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I didn't get to the last meeting, but I wanted to be here because I know how hard everybody's worked on, and I was wanting to hear the comments. With regard to that, I met with George Dark, and he presented his presentation that he was showing at the university. And in fact, I spoke with Mr. Mizzi, and I've asked him to let us know when he's available to make the presentation to the Planning Committee. So I don't know whether you would want it at both committees, but I've asked him his availability when he's already coming to town to work further, because I thought it's a significant piece of work. And, you know, with what we've been talking about with the reviewing the, what do you call it? What's it called? I'm losing my mind. You know, we're reviewing zoning for, what is it, for? What's the word I'm missing? No, not heritage.
Not the infill too.
No, but that's part of it. That fits in too as part of it. But we're reviewing our standard, pardon? No. It's more simple. It's so simple that Yeah, you know, like we have R4. Sorry, R4. See, I told you it was simple. Yeah, so therefore we are reviewing that, and I thought that it fit in really well with that. But it also is so much a part of our LRT and the whole Rideau to Herdman, certainly parcel of land. So I have made the invitation. I haven't heard back from him yet, and
Just let us know, then we can attend the plan.
yeah, or
Yeah.
you know, if he's available.
Okay, and he's someone who travels to Ottawa. He lives somewhere else?
He does. He works out of Toronto.
Okay.
And Urban Strategies, I think, is his company. But he's the lead on the U-Ottawa plan.
Okay, great. So once
I
we
will
have
let
a
you
date-
know.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that because a portion of the master plan for the University of Ottawa campus actually is in the Sandy Hill Heritage Study Area that has been done, and that will come sometime, I guess, into this committee. Oh, you're saying it won't come to this committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the University of Ottawa is not in the Sandy Hill Heritage Study Area. Can I appreciate Vice Chair Podolsky's wish to hear about the plan, but Mr. Dark's work. But it's not in the mandate, you know, that we currently work under to have information reports like that come forward. Now, of course, if the chair and the vice chair want to invite Mr. Dark to speak or to take the option of attending the planning committee that Chair Harder just outlined to us, that's fine. But at this current moment, we don't have the power to ask someone to come to speak to Built Heritage Subcommittee. But of course, you do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I think at this stage, I think the logical way forward is once I'll speak to Chair Harder after this, we'll figure out if there is a date established for a presentation to the Planning Committee. We could either piggyback on that, or if there was an opportunity, if he happened to be in town during a meeting that we have scheduled, then we could also invite him to come. I don't think this is an issue of compelling anyone. I think this is the issue of inviting, in this case, a presentation of it, given that there will be interesting heritage linkages, regardless of whether the actual master plan affects the study area. Is that...
Yeah, I think the inquiry was just to find out whether there was any intention within the city to invite the University of Ottawa, not necessarily just the planning consultant, to share the the vision of the master plan, and it does overlap a number of blocks where there are Category 2 and Category 3 buildings, and because I'm on the advisory committee, I know that quite well, and I think it would be of interest to this committee to invite the university to present to this committee, as well as planning committee, and the proposals would be focused on the heritage aspects, conservation and impact of the plan.
Okay, great. I think that's a useful suggestion, and as I say, I will take that on board and have a discussion about possible dates and opportunities. Thank you. Okay, any other inquiries? Or did you want to say something again?
Well, I just was listening to Vice Chair Podolsky, and given the fact that he's on the working group for the U-Ottawa plan, I was just wondering whether you have the people that are working with you on the more heritage aspect, rather than Mr. Dark and the fact he's in Toronto, and the fact that, you know, then we get into costs involved and that sort of thing. That's why I'm trying to work with his schedule. But maybe if there's aspects specific that you know about, Vice Chair, that you could bring a presentation and maybe lead the presentation, you could work on that as well. And I'll still let you know, Chair, when if Mr. Dark, and he did offer when I met with him that he would make himself available if we were interested, but I'm trying to accommodate it when he's here on, quite frankly, someone else's dime.
The university is intentionally carrying on a major outreach program to communicate the vision of the plan, and they are trying to consult as widely as possible on all aspects, whether it's student housing or heritage or, economic development, their academic agendas. So I think it's a useful invitation, and I don't think they would hesitate at all to piggyback on other meetings.
Great. Thank you. Okay, any other inquiries? I see none. Other business? Okay, then I move to adjourn. Garrett? Great. Adjourn. The next meeting, by the way, is Thursday, the 14th of May, for the purpose of your calendars. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff, too.